What we have here is a polling place as it would be set up at 5 o'clock in the morning on an election day. There's a AVC Advantage voting machine folded up as it's been sitting here since it was delivered. And at about 5:15 in the morning, poll workers arrive with their election supplies to open up the polling place and set up the voting machine. So while she is unpacking the election supplies such as poll books and setting them out on the voter sign-in table, I will go ahead and start unfolding the voting machine. This is a full-face direct recording electronic voting machine, and what that means is that the entire ballot is visible on the voter panel of the voting machine. This is not a video display. What we have here is a large printed paper ballot with the names of the candidates printed on it, and behind the paper ballot there are buttons and lights, and the buttons can be pressed right through the paper and the lights are visible right through the paper. So here's the back of the AVC Advantage voting machine, and the first thing I'll do is plug it into the wall. Now I unlock the back door. So this is the inside of the cabinet of the AVC Advantage voting machine. During an election, this door is normally shut, and it gets opened up at the beginning of the day to open the polls and at the end of the day to close the polls. This is the operator panel, and it's used by election workers to enable the machine for the next voter between each voter. This sheet metal panel here covers the main circuit board, which has the computer that's inside the voting machine counting out votes. This is the on-off switch, and what the poll workers would do first thing in the morning is turn this to on. So now the machine is turning itself on. This is the printer, and this is used at the beginning of the day to print candidate totals that should appear as 0, and it's used at the end of the day to print the results of the election. But during the election itself, while voters are voting, nothing prints out on this printer. This box contains a second computer that's used for audio voting by blind voters and voters with other kinds of disabilities that prefer to vote by audio. This is the results cartridge, and before the election, the ballot definition containing the names of the candidates and contests is loaded into this results cartridge, and the results cartridge is inserted into the voting machine, and that's how the ballot definition is communicated to the voting machine before the election. Then at the close of the polls, this cartridge will contain vote data, the election results for votes cast on this voting machine, and the results cartridge will be removed from the machine and taken to a place where results from many voting machines will be accumulated. So now what the election workers do is they wait until 5 minutes before the polls open, that is 5 minutes till 6 o'clock in the morning, at which point they officially begin the process of opening the polls. And that's done by turning this key switch from the closed position to the open position. And now the machine will begin the process of printing the 0 tape. That is, the number of votes recorded for each candidate in the machine is printed out on this printer right here, and it should be all zeros. There should be no votes recorded in the machine at the beginning of the day. Of course, there's a computer in the machine, and it can print whatever it wants, but we'll wait here for it to print the zero tape. Now this machine is set up exactly as Union County, New Jersey set it up for the presidential primary election of February 5th, 2008. So that you can see here that in the Democratic primary, we have Barack Obama, Dennis Kucinich, John Edwards, Joe Biden, Bill Richardson, Hillary Clinton, and personal choice, which is a write-in vote. And in the Republican primary, we have Rudy Giuliani, Fred Thompson, Mitt Romney, John McCain, Ron Paul, Mike Huckabee, and also personal choice. And on the zero tape, you can see in this column the number of votes for each of these candidates is 0. Below the candidate totals, we have what are called option switch totals, and this is the number of voters that have been permitted to vote in the Democratic primary, which is listed as 0 because the election has not opened yet. And down here, the number of voters that have been permitted to vote in the Republican primary, which is also 0. And the poll workers print this at the beginning of the election day, just before the polls open. Okay, so we will now take this to the table where voters sign in so that they can see for themselves the zero tape report. As part of setting up the machine, the poll workers install a privacy curtain so that voters can cast their vote in secret, and this prevents bribery and prevents voters from being coerced to vote for a particular candidate. So now we have the first voter of the day who approaches the voter sign-in table. And this voter is registered in the Republican Party. So she'll sign her name in the poll book, and she'll be handed a voting authority ticket that enables her to vote in the Republican primary. And remember, this is the primary election of February 5th, 2008 for the presidential election. She hands the voting authority ticket to another poll worker who is known as the operator. If this were a general election, then activating the machine would be as simple as pressing this green button. But since this is a primary election, the voter is permitted to vote only in one primary or the other, depending on which kind of voting authority ticket she hands to the poll worker. So to activate this machine to permit a vote in the Republican primary, the poll worker presses this button marked 12 next to the label Republican, and then presses activate. So now that the machine has been activated, the voter can step into the voting booth and cast a vote on the voting machine. So go ahead inside. Well, of course, we can't see what the voter is doing because there's a privacy curtain. For the purposes of this video, in order to show what's going on, we will remove the privacy curtain for the rest of this video. This is what faces the voter as she is enabled to vote in the Republican primary, just as the machine has been configured by Union County, New Jersey for the presidential primary. This voter has been permitted to vote in the Republican primary, but you see that both the Democratic primary ballot and the Republican primary ballot are printed on the paper. So why don't you go ahead and select a Republican candidate, and you can see that a green X lights up right next to the button that the voter pushed. Now that this candidate has been selected, the voter casts the vote by pressing the red button that's marked Cast Vote. And the LCD display at the bottom of the voter panel has the words "Vote recorded, thank you." The second voter arrives. The second voter is also a Republican, so she signs the poll book, and because her party affiliation is recorded as Republican in the poll book, she's handed a Republican voting authority ticket, and she brings this to the voting machine and hands it to the operator. And once again, the operator, the poll worker standing next to the voting machine, activates this machine for the Republican Party primary by pressing this 12 button next to the label Republican, and then the green activate button. We see that the Democratic candidates are not active. If the voter tries to press the button for a Democratic candidate, go ahead and press a button for a Democratic candidate. No green X lights up. Try several different Democratic candidates. In each case, nothing happens. Only the Republican Party ballot is active, so if you press a button for a Republican candidate, the green X lights up. And that was Giuliani. And once again, you can press the cast vote button, which is lit up over there. Okay, that was voter number 2. Voter number 3 arrives and signs in at the sign-in table. This voter is registered as a Democrat, so she will be permitted to vote in the Democratic primary. She's handed, this time, a blue voting authority ticket and hands that to the poll worker at the operator panel. And this time, because the voter is a Democrat and is permitted to vote only in the Democratic primary, the poll worker activates the Democratic ballot by pressing the 6 button over here next to the label marked Democrat, and then the activate button. So that you can see that the red light is lit up next to the 6 on the Democrat side. Inside the voting booth, there's no visual indication of which party's primary ballot is activated, but if the voter tries to press a button in the Republican primary, nothing will happen. There will be no green X that lights up. Why don't you go ahead and press a button in the Republican side, and you can see that the machine doesn't respond in any way. Why don't you go ahead and select a Democratic candidate, and the green X lights up by the Democratic candidate. Now suppose the voter changes her mind or has pressed that button by mistake and she would like to vote for a different candidate, so she presses the button for Hillary Clinton. To switch your selection from one to another on this machine, you first need to press the same button again to deselect, as she does now, and then she can press for Clinton. The green X now lights up by Clinton, and now the voter can cast her vote by pressing the cast vote button. And once again, the alpha display shows vote recorded. Thank you. Voter number 4 arrives, and she approaches the voting machine and hands the voting authority ticket to the poll worker. The poll worker has been handed a Democratic voting authority, so he presses this 6 button right here to enable the machine for the Democratic ballot. Then, by mistake, he presses the 5 button, and then he presses the activate button. You can hear by the sound that the machine has been activated, and this red light here is lit by the label Democrat, just as expected. The operator has pressed the Democratic button and has not pressed the Republican button, but in fact the Democratic ballot has not been enabled. If you press a button for any of the Democratic candidates, no X will light up. Why don't you try a different Democratic candidate or another one? But in fact, the machine has activated the Republican Party primary ballot. If you were to press a button for a Republican candidate, the X lights up. So choose some candidate.
Can I do the write-in?
No, do that next. Choose some candidate, and now go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, that was a vote for Ron Paul. Voter number 5 arrives, also a Democrat, signs into the poll book, receives a Democratic voting authority ticket, and hands it to the poll worker. The poll worker has been here since before 6 o'clock in the morning, and now it's approaching 8 o'clock at night. The poll worker is supposed to press the 6 button and then the activate button. If the poll worker presses the 6 button and then this button that's right next to activate by mistake, the polls aren't open. The poll worker can correct his mistake by pressing activate, and we're again in the same situation that the indicator light for the Democratic primary ballot is lit, but inside the machine, from the voter panel, only the Republican primary ballot is active. None of the Democratic buttons are active. Why don't you try the Democratic buttons? And for none of these buttons can she get the X to light up. So she might try to press a Republican button, just press Huckabee or something. You can see the X lights up, but this voter perhaps doesn't want to vote for Mike Huckabee. She wants to vote for a Democratic candidate. She might have the idea of doing a write-in vote. So this is how write-in votes are cast. You press personal choice, and she's typing in Biden. If we show this right here, she's typed the name Biden in as a write-in vote. And then she presses enter. And now she's prepared to cast this vote. This will be recorded as a vote for Joe Biden in the Republican primary. Joe Biden is not running in the Republican primary and is not likely to get any other votes in the Republican primary. So in fact, this vote does Joe Biden no good whatsoever, and it's basically a lost vote. Go ahead and press the cast vote button. And that was voter number 5. Voter number 6 arrives, signs in, and receives a Democratic voting authority ticket. Hands this ticket to the operator, who's not really paying enough attention and forgets to press the button to activate the machine. Presses a button in the Democratic primary to vote for a candidate. And you can see that she pressed the button and the green X lit up, and now she presses cast vote to cast that vote, and you can see that the cast vote button lights up. And then she looks at the LCD panel where it says vote recorded, thank you. But in fact, no vote has been recorded at all. The machine was never activated to accept a vote, and this was not a vote. It was a simulation of a vote. This can happen when the poll worker simply forgets to press the button to enable the machine. And it's an understandable error. The poll workers work very long hours. But a poll worker could also do this, a corrupt poll worker could also do this maliciously, just fail to activate the machine for those voters that he thinks might vote the wrong way. In fact, the poll worker can even cause the machine to fail to accept a vote even after it's made the activation signal. The voter approaches the voting machine, hands the voting authority to the poll worker. The poll worker is going to press the following sequence of buttons. He presses 6, then activate, then 12. And you heard the chirping signal that the machine makes to alert people in the room, including the voter and the other poll workers, that the machine is activated. This is a Democratic voter, so she selects a Democratic candidate. She presses the button for Joe Biden, and the X lights up. And she then presses the cast vote button, and it lights up. And then the LCD display says vote recorded, thank you. In fact, the behavior, which may look very reasonable to the voter, is the same as the behavior when the machine is not activated at all. And in fact, this vote has not been recorded by the machine, even though the machine made the chirping sound that it makes for when it's activated and prepared to accept a vote. This is a Republican voter for the Republican Party. Let's step inside the curtain with the voter. In the Republican primary ballot, at far left, Rudy Giuliani, then Fred Thompson, then Mitt Romney, then John McCain, Ron Paul, and Mike Huckabee. If you would put your finger over Rudy Giuliani, and then put your finger over Mike Huckabee. Poll worker, who has been pressing the buttons to activate the machines, can actually see through a slot between the two panels of the voting machine to where the voter's finger is on the ballot. So what we'll do now is take a look through that slot, which can be observed in just the ordinary position that a poll worker would be standing, as the voter moves her finger between Rudy Giuliani and Mike Huckabee. If you would put your finger over Rudy Giuliani on the Republican ballot, and now instead put your finger over the button for Mike Huckabee on the Republican ballot. And then you can go ahead and vote for Mike Huckabee. Thank you. So in fact, the curtain doesn't provide quite enough privacy of the ballot on this voting machine. It's now 8 o'clock in the evening. It's time to close the polls. So the last voter has voted, and now the poll workers fold up the voting machine and close the polls. All of the records, such as voting authorities, are packed up by the poll workers. To close the polls, we open the door of the voting machine, and then this key switch is going to be turned from the polls opened to the polls closed position. And the next thing the machine is going to do is print the results report on its printer. So the results report has finished printing, and this is what is seen by the witnesses in the polling place right on the election night. And what we have here is we have one Democratic vote for Hillary Clinton and no other Democratic votes. And we have a total of 5 Republican votes, Giuliani, Thompson, Paul, Huckabee, and a write-in for Biden. Down here we have option switch totals. This records the number of voters that have been permitted to vote in the Democratic primary by the operator selecting the Democratic primary on the option switch. And by option switch number 6, which is marked as Dem, we have 3. And by option switch number 12, which is marked as Rep, we have also 3. We see here that the total number of voters permitted to vote in each party's primary election does not match the total number of votes tallied in each of those elections. In theory, this should not be possible unless the computer program has made an error in tabulation. Now, the way that the AVC Advantage voting machine transmits its results electronically for accumulation with all the other precincts is through this removable results cartridge. So this results cartridge contains votes that are in principle the same ones as we saw on the tape. And what the poll worker does is, after the close of the polls, remove it from the voting machine to be taken to the municipal clerk or the county clerk to be tabulated with all the other precincts, the other election districts. And at this point, the election workers turn off the machine, which I will do with this on-off knob. and then stow the operator panel back on its stowage hook. Close the door of the machine. Lock it up. And the key is also taken away by the election workers that evening. The next step is to unplug the machine, so the last step of stowing the voting machine after it's locked up is to take it out of the way, because this is typically some sort of elementary school gymnasium, and the kids will be in early the next morning running around. And meanwhile, the election workers pack up all of the election supplies, the poll books, the voting authorities, the keys, the results cartridge, and the results reports. The results cartridges and the results reports will be delivered to the clerk, and so on. So this is the polling place by about 9 p.m. On election night. So this is still election night. This is a computer owned by Union County, New Jersey, used in its election warehouse. It's a Microsoft Windows notebook computer. It's running an application called WinEDS, sold by Sequoia for tabulation of the results from its voting machines. And attached to that computer is this device, which is a ballot cartridge or results cartridge reader. These computers are routinely connected to the internet by cables such as this one, as we have discovered in our examination. So on election night, the results cartridge is inserted into the WinEDS computer, and the vote data from that results cartridge is uploaded into a database. Instead of doing that upload right now, I'll just demonstrate that this results cartridge contains votes recorded that are the same as what we saw on the printed results report. Here we have the results report that was printed by the voting machine immediately at the close of the polls. And on the screen of the computer, we have the electronically generated results report from the corresponding results cartridge. And you can see that the votes are the same. And the option switch totals are the same, 3 in the Democratic primary and 3 in the Republican primary. So the same inconsistency between voters in the primary and votes in each party's primary is exhibited on the electronic results cartridge, as was exhibited on the paper results report. Now to demonstrate vote counting, both legitimate and fraudulent, on the AVC Advantage voting machine, we're going to conduct 2 complete elections on this machine. The first election will be with the firmware as provided from the factory, the legitimate firmware from Sequoia Voting Systems, and we will initialize the machine with a fresh ballot definition corresponding to the New Jersey presidential primary of February 5th, 2008. Then we'll conduct pre-election logic and accuracy testing, in which we will cast 20 votes in the Democratic primary. And then we will turn the machine to its official election mode and cast 20 ballots in that election. I'm going to do a system reset on this machine to prepare it for the next election. Now we will fast forward through the normal process of installing a new ballot definition, which involves approximately 3.5 minutes of pushing buttons on the operator panel. Now, in a pre-election logic and accuracy test, just as in a regular election, you open the polls by turning the key switch. So that's what I'll do next. Okay, and the machine has almost finished printing out its zero tape for the prelat. That is the printout that shows that every candidate has 0 votes in the pre-election logic and accuracy test mock election. Normally, the operator panel is hung on the side of the machine during an election. It's attached to the computer inside the machine by a cable like this. What we're going to do for this video, so that we can capture everything we do on one shot, is to hold the operator panel in this position so that it appears on the video. And that way, the camera will be able to see what buttons the voter is pushing and what buttons the operator is pushing. The polls are open, so now we're going to cast 20 votes in the Democratic primary. And this is the prelat. This prelat is conducted at the election warehouse before the machines are shipped to the polling places. So it would normally be an election worker who's acting in the role of the voter and casting these votes. Okay, so I will press 6 and then activate to enable the first voter. And the first vote
is for Bill Richardson.
Okay, now I will enable the second vote.
Second vote is for Dennis Kucinich. Third vote is for Bill Richardson. Fourth vote is for Bill Richardson. Fifth vote is for Bill Richardson. Polls are closed for the pre-lat test.
Well, polls are about to be closed. To close the polls, I have to open the back door of the machine and turn the key switch. As you can see here on the pre-lat results report, we have 4 votes recorded for Dennis Kucinich. We have 16 votes recorded for Bill Richardson, and we have 0 votes for each of the other candidates. The pre-lat, the pre-election logic and accuracy test that we just performed, is normally performed by election employees in the election warehouse. And then the next step is to fold up the machine and prepare it for shipment to the polling places. And then the next thing that will happen is that the machine will arrive at the polling place 1 or 2 or 3 days before the election. So here's our polling place. So here's the voting machine at the election site. And as we've shown earlier on this video, there's a certain sequence of operations that the poll workers perform when they arrive at 5:15 in the morning on election day. All right, the zero tape has printed out, and it shows 0 votes for every candidate. Okay, so I'm going to activate the machine.
Vote number 1 is for Bill Richardson.
Now we will proceed to close the polls. Four votes for Dennis Kucinich, 16 votes for Bill Richardson, and 0 votes for each of the other candidates. In the internal memory of the AVC Advantage voting machine, there's a copy of the ballot image for each voter. That means a record of how each voter individually cast their entire ballot for all the contests on the ballot. In this case of the presidential primary election, there's only one contest on the ballot. And the machine has a facility to print out a record of the internal ballot images stored in the machine. And Sequoia calls this the audit trail. So what I'm going to do now is press the sequence of buttons on the menus here to ask the machine to print out a copy of its so-called audit trail. What's printed on the audit trail report is a list of every ballot cast, and each row of this report is one ballot cast. The list is not in exactly the same order that the voters voted them, and that's an attempt to protect the privacy of the voter as they cast their ballot. And this Op 6 means that option switch button number 6 had been pressed by the operator to enable the Democratic primary ballot. And this H13 here refers to column H, row 13 of the voter panel, and that was the button for Bill Richardson. So we can see that there are 3 votes for Bill Richardson, then 1 vote for Dennis Kucinich, then 1 vote for Bill Richardson, 2 votes for Bill Richardson, and 1 vote for Dennis Kucinich, and so on. And this is not in exactly the same order that the voter cast the ballot. It's shuffled a little bit to preserve the secret ballot. And then we have the official election audit trail totals, where the machine has added up again the number of votes. And we have here 4 votes for Dennis Kucinich and 16 votes for Bill Richardson. And we can see, in fact, that there are 4 different E13 ballots, and all of the rest of the ballots are H13 ballots. So in this case, the internal memory record of the individual ballot images corresponds exactly to the totals printed for the candidates in the results report. Now what normally happens in an election is that the voting machine is left in the polling place, where it will be picked up a few days later by the shipping company. And the poll worker on the election night carries the results cartridge to the clerk's office, where the totals for this precinct are accumulated with all the other precincts on the computer. I'm now going to ask it to produce a copy of the results, the election results that are recorded in this cartridge. So that's in the reports menu, and I will choose election results report. And what we see here is an official election results report which lists 4 votes for Dennis Kucinich and 16 votes for Bill Richardson. And the next report I will generate is the election audit trail report from the same cartridge. So this is an audit trail record report. It shows the same sequence of H13, meaning Richardson, 3 times, then E13, meaning Kucinich, 1 time, and then 2 more H13s, 1 E13, and so on. And then when WinEDS adds up those ballots, it gets a total of 4 votes for Dennis Kucinich and 16 votes for Bill Richardson. So what we see is that the contents of the cartridge memory correspond to the contents of the internal memory of the AVC Advantage as that machine printed it out onto its result tape. So this is an AVC Advantage direct recording electronic voting machine. Like all VRE voting machines, it has a computer inside that interprets the buttons that the voter pushes and gives feedback to the voter, and also decides, on the basis of what the voter does on the user interface, what numbers to record for the candidates in its internal memory. And this is entirely at the discretion of the program that the computer inside the voting machine is running. If someone were to replace the program with a fraudulent program, that fraudulent program could give feedback to the voter that indicates that the voter's selections have been recorded, but could instead add numbers to the wrong candidate's vote totals. So if someone has access to the machine and is able to replace the program in the machine, they can install fraudulent firmware. In the election warehouse, and while the machines are being shipped from the warehouse to the polling places, the people who have access to the voting machines are the employees and the contractors of the election officials. But while the voting machines are in the polling places, then members of the public also have access to them. Because these machines are large and heavy, the poll workers do not remove them from the polling places immediately at the close of the polls on election night. Instead, they're left in the polling places for a few days until a trucking company can come pick them up. A typical polling place is an elementary school gymnasium or a firehouse, and it's common to see in New Jersey AVC Advantage voting machines folded up just as you see this one here against the wall of the gym. And many of these polling sites are unlocked, not only during the day when the school or the firehouse or the church is in use, but even after hours for special events such as Girl Scout meetings. What I'm going to show you now is that anyone who has a few minutes access to the AVC Advantage voting machine can open it up and replace the software inside with fraudulent software. Now, in this voting machine, the computer program is stored on ROM chips that look like this. So I have here 3 ROM chips, and there are ROM chips of this type inside the machine that contain the firmware, and when the machines come from the factory, presumably they contain the firmware of the computer program as it's provided by Sequoia. And what I've done is I've prepared a fraudulent computer program, one that appears to count the votes, but in fact switches votes from one candidate to another. And I've arranged it so that just by replacing one of the ROM chips in the AVC Advantage voting machine, you can install this fraudulent section of the program that switches votes around. And what I'll demonstrate right now is how to open up the machine and replace the ROM chip in the machine so that it will miscount votes in an election. So the door to the voting machine is locked with a key. It was left locked by the poll workers. And the first thing that an attacker would have to do to install a fraudulent program is to pick the lock. So I'll do that first. Now I'm going to unhook the operator panel just to get it out of the way. Now I'm going to unscrew this sheet metal panel which covers up the computer circuit board containing the computer and the ROM chips that have the computer program. This is the Z80 computer chip on the main circuit board, and these three white label chips are the ROMs, and I'll just have to replace this one ROM chip with a fraudulent computer program. So I remove it simply by prying it loose from its socket with a screwdriver. So this is the legitimate computer program as installed by the manufacturer. And here is one of my fake ROM chips. It's a real ROM chip containing a fraudulent computer program that I've previously prepared. And I install it simply by pressing it into the socket. And now I have to reinstall the cover. And now I have to screw in all the screws again. And now I'll have to pick the lock once more to get it to close. And that's it. So at this point, changing the computer program won't affect the machine's ability to cheat in previous elections, but now in every future election run on this machine, the fraudulent software will be installed. And software of this kind can easily recognize in the ballot definition which are the Republican candidates and which are the Democratic candidates and so on. So this machine will now start cheating in future elections, and what we'll do now is run the next election. Normally, the races on the ballot in the next election would not be the same as the races on the ballot in the previous election. But since this machine has a printed paper ballot sheet that's set up exactly for the New Jersey presidential primary election of February 2008, as Union County provided this machine to us, we will conduct an election corresponding to that presidential primary. We will go through the same process we did before of clearing out the vote totals from the primary election ballot definition. So we have a ballot definition with no votes. Instruct the machine to load this new ballot definition, and then we'll go through pre-lat. What's printed at the top of this printout is pre-election lat 0 proof report, so that the computer program in the machine knows very well that it's in the pre-election mode and not the official election mode. So this is the first voter in the pre-election logic and accuracy test after the fraudulent firmware chip has been installed in the machine. Okay, to close this pre-election logic and accuracy test, I will turn the key switch to the polls closed position. And the next thing that will happen is that a pre-lat results report will print out on the printer. 4 votes for Kucinich, 16 votes for Richardson, 0 votes for each of the other candidates. And this is the pre-election lat results report with the fraudulent ROM chip. I will stow the operator panel. I will close the back door. Okay, unplug it. And now the machine is ready for shipment to the polling place. The poll workers arrive the morning of the election, and what they have to do is plug in the machine, open it up, and turn it on to prepare it for the election. So that's what I'll do. Okay, we've just turned on the voting machine, and it says ready to open polls. It doesn't recognize in any way that fraudulent software has been installed. And to open the polls, I will use the key switch. So this key switch is to turn from the polls closed position to the polls open position. And the first thing the machine will do, as usual, is print out a zero tape showing that the number of official election votes recorded for each candidate at the beginning of the election day is 0.
It'd be great if we could get everything on one continuous piece of tape, but I've only got 20 minutes left and 20 minutes of battery.
Do you need to plug in some way? Can you run it with the battery?
I'm gonna have to shut it down temporarily, for
And how long
a
is it going to take to
second.
recharge? Oh, I see.
I have spare batteries, but
Right. Okay, so you recommend that we switch tapes. Does it take more than 20 minutes to run one of these? It might.
It might.
Yeah. All right, the videographer reports that there's...
we can keep going until it's a convenient break if you want to
all right,
rip
let's
that
do
off
that.
and then label it.
All right, I'm going to rip this off and label it, but first I'll display it for the camera. It's the official election 0 proof report, and it shows 0 votes for each of the candidates. This is a simulation of an official election at the polling place. What I've done by now is turn the key switch to open the polls. Unbeknownst to the poll workers and the voters, there's been a $3.50 ROM chip installed in the machine that contains fraudulent firmware. And the last step in opening the polls after turning that key switch is to close and lock the back door, because that back door stays closed during the election day. So I'll do that now. All right, Maya. So in an election, the poll worker, the operator, stands here to press buttons on the operator panel to activate the machine for each voter, and the voter will be in the voting booth, normally hidden inside the privacy curtain that we've removed for this demonstration. And also for this demonstration, to make it more clear what buttons the operator is pushing on the operator panel, I will hold the operator panel like this. And to enable one voter in the Democratic presidential primary, I first press the 6 by the label Democrat to select which primary ballot will be activated, and then I press the green Activate button.
First vote, Richardson. Second vote, Kucinich. Third vote, Richardson. Fourth vote, Richardson. Fifth vote, Richardson. Richardson. Seventh vote, Kucinich. Eighth vote, Richardson. Ninth vote, Richardson. Tenth vote, Kucinich. Eleventh vote, Richardson. Twelfth vote, Richardson. Thirteenth vote, Richardson. Fourteenth vote, Richardson. Fifteenth vote, Richardson. Sixteenth vote, Richardson. Seventeenth vote, Kucinich. Eighteenth vote, Richardson. Nineteenth vote, Richardson. Twentieth vote, Richardson.
All right. 20 votes have been cast in this election, and the next thing I will do is close the polls. And I close the polls by opening the back door of the machine and turning the key switch to the polls closed position. And the next thing that will happen is that the results report will print out. Now, what this results report shows is 12 votes for Dennis Kucinich, 8 votes for Bill Richardson, and 0 votes for each of the other candidates. This is even though only 4 votes were actually cast for Dennis Kucinich and 16 votes were cast for Bill Richardson. Now, I should say that I have great respect for Dennis Kucinich and his integrity and the integrity of his supporters, and I mean to in no way imply that any supporter of Dennis Kucinich would alter a voting machine to cheat in his favor. However, I wanted to demonstrate this hack on the ballot as it was configured by Union County, New Jersey for the 2008 presidential primary. So therefore I had to choose some candidate that was on the ballot to receive the benefit of the hack. The next thing I'm going to do is use the menus on the operator panel to print all of the ballot images of the actual ballots cast stored in the internal memory, the so-called audit trail. So if you'll bring the camera around.
So they're really the ballots recorded rather than ballots.
These are the ballots recorded, that's right. So it's supposed to be the ballots cast. Okay, so first I need to press this print more button at the same time I press test. And I'm going to press Start in the Audit Trail Report menu and print this official audit trail. And now we see on the printer the report is printing. It's called Official Audit Trail Report. Now this report comes in 3 sections. The first is the totals recorded as such in the internal memory. The second section will be the list of individual ballot images showing how each voter voted in all the contests. Of course, in this particular presidential primary election, each voter could vote in only one contest. And then after that will be the totals that the machine adds up of those ballot images. When this finishes printing, I'll just tear it off and then you can focus in on it.
I've actually been getting pretty good shots of
All right.
the print coming out of the printer, so we can do both. But
Okay. In this official election audit trail record, each line corresponds to one voter. And the first element in each line is the option switch setting. Op 6 means that the poll worker selected the Democratic primary ballot to be enabled for the voter. And then on the remainder of the line are records of all the votes that the voter cast. Of course, in this election, there was only one race on the ballot. H13 means column H, row number 13, and that corresponds on the full-face printed ballot to Bill Richardson. E13 means column E, row 13, and that corresponds to Dennis Kucinich. And we can see, we can count up the number of E13s in this list. This list is not in exactly the same order that the voters voted, because that preserves in some way the privacy of the ballot. So the number of E13s listed here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That means 12 ballots recorded for Dennis Kucinich. And the number of H13s here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means 8 ballot images recorded for Bill Richardson. And then at the bottom of this report, the computer in the voting machine has added up those ballot images again for us and has again 12 votes for Dennis Kucinich and 8 votes for Bill Richardson. This is the results cartridge as it would be taken from the polling place to the clerk's office on the evening of the election so that the votes could be retrieved from the cartridge and accumulated in the election database with the results from all the other precincts. And what I'll do is I'll just use the cartridge utility program to print a report of the results that are stored, the election results report for this cartridge. So here's the election results report, the official election results report, and as you can see, it lists 12 votes for Dennis Kucinich, 8 votes for Bill Richardson, and 0 votes for each of the other candidates. The paper here is printed out by the voting machine just after the polls were closed from its internal memory and shows the individual ballot images as the machine recorded them, with H13 corresponding to Richardson and E13 corresponding to Kucinich. And we can see that the contents of the report generated from the ballot cartridge, the results cartridge, matches exactly the report from the internal record. And I'll just scroll down to the bottom of this report, and line by line it's the same. And then finally I will show the last section of the official audit trail report where the Win EDS program has added up those ballot images for us again, and it shows 12 votes for Dennis Kucinich and 8 votes for Bill Richardson. So although the way the votes were cast on this machine is 4 votes for Kucinich and 16 votes for Richardson, the fraudulent firmware that I installed has taken care to make all 4 of the records agree with each other and disagree with the votes that were actually cast. So the records don't serve as a useful check against each other. They're not independent. They were all generated by the same fraudulent computer program, and this fraudulent computer program took care to make them agree with each other. So this is another voting machine provided to us for examination by Union County, New Jersey. And on this machine, there's a plastic strap seal right here that's installed in the results cartridge holder. And this seal is supposed to provide tamper evidence. For example, if somebody were to remove the circuit board cover that protects where the computer chips and ROM chips are. And supposedly, if someone removed the circuit board cover and replaced the ROMs, this seal would provide tamper evidence because it's supposed to block the removal of this circuit board cover. And what I'm going to show is that it's easy to remove the circuit board cover without disturbing the plastic seal. So I will start unscrewing the necessary screws. And as you can see, I've removed the circuit board cover and the seal is still in place. So it's posed no obstacle or any kind of tamper evidence for replacing the ROM chip that's right here on the main circuit board. This is the configuration of the AVC Advantage voting machine just after the election workers have closed the polls by turning the key switch to the polls closed position. And the next thing the election worker would do is remove the results cartridge from the voting machine. So I'll do that here. This result cartridge contains the votes and the vote totals stored in an electronic memory. And this end of the result cartridge has a plug that it uses to plug into some other computer that can read and write data, vote data and ballot data from this results cartridge. Now, there's no electronic form of authentication that guarantees that the data in this results cartridge came from a particular voting machine. So that means while this results cartridge is in transit between the voting machine and the clerk's office where the totals are accumulated, it's vulnerable to tampering. And I've made a mock-up here of a device that could be used to alter the contents of a result cartridge. It's about the size of a package of cigarettes, and I've installed it in this package of Virginia Slims. But if we take the end cover off the package, we see that there's a connector plug that will fit into the corresponding plug of the result cartridge. Now, just by putting this computer that's inside the cigarette pack into the results cartridge for just a second or two, that's sufficient time for the computer to read all the vote totals and decide how much it wants to alter them and write back different result totals to the results cartridge. And if a corrupt election worker were to do this, either immediately as he removes the results, if a corrupt election worker were to do this, either immediately as he removes the result cartridge from the voting machine, or any time as the results cartridge is in transit to the clerk's office, or in the clerk's office before the results cartridge is inserted into the computer for tabulation, then the results in this machine, in this cartridge, would be fraudulent, and those fraudulent results would be added with the results from the other precincts to make the official election totals. And I'll show here a little more closely what's in the cigarette package. This connector is a very standard connector known as IEEE 488. And this particular cigarette pack is just a mock-up and doesn't contain a functional computer.